Okay, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started right on time. Want to welcome everybody to our panel. Topic is Change Your Mind, Grit over GPA, New Models of Measuring Workplace Performance. I'm Paul Freedman. I'm the CEO of ApprenNet and the founding partner of Entangled Ventures. In both roles, I spend a lot of time in the intersection between higher education and career. And the one definitive fact that I've found is that that intersection is changing. It used to be, a decade ago, most employers trusted a degree as a black box. They didn't need to know what went in it, but they trusted it as the primary signal for employment and was a requisite for most knowledge economy jobs. That's potentially changing. There's new data that suggests that the traditional measures of performance, GPA, what school you went to, what major you took, are not predictive of long-term success in the workforce. And so we have a very esteemed panel to dive into that topic at greater depth. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Kristen.
Hi, Kristen Hamilton. I'm the CEO of a company called Koru. We're a relatively new 3-year-old company. We help employers to choose the best talent for them based on new signals that are not GPA or college that was attended. Things like grit, things like rigor, things like curiosity, ownership, teamwork. And we have a data model that sits underneath that to measure those things. Really, we're in service of employers because they are the customers of the talent that comes through the education system and into the workforce.
And I'm Brendan Brown, LinkedIn's Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition, where I've been for the past 6 years or so, and spent pretty much my whole career in recruiting and HR since I graduated from Villanova University, this year's NCAA basketball champions, which was awesome. And I graduated from there in the mid-90s.
Alex Ehrlich. I am excuse me, Managing Director of Morgan Stanley based in New York. I run several businesses within the overall institutional equities division of Morgan Stanley. And I've spent 37 years on Wall Street for 3 firms. I started my career at Goldman Sachs. I spent 24 years there. Then spent 6 years at UBS, and I'm in my 7th year at Morgan Stanley, making me old. And the reason I'm here, because as a practitioner, not in the education space, not in the technology space, but I'm a practitioner, and the reason I'm here is because the most fundamentally important determinant, we believe, of our own success has to do with our ability to identify the behaviors that we want to see in the people that we hire, and then especially in the people that we promote. And so we actually met the folks from Koru and really felt that we were meeting people who understood from a technology and implementation perspective what we were trying to get at in our own way in terms of identifying people that could drive our performance based on things well beyond GPA and work ethic, which we think are sort of the most fundamental and least differentiated skills that we could be recruiting for.
Hey, my name is Anthony. Anthony Saleh. I am the CEO of Emagen Entertainment Group. We are an independent music management company. My 2 major acts are the rapper Future and the rapper Nas. Nas and I have been investing in technology for the last almost 7 years now. And we have our own venture fund that we raised in 2013. And we've been investing in early stage technology out of that fund since. I think I'm here because we hire, in my field or my world, we hire for almost the exact opposite reasons. Like, it's all behavior. We don't really care where you went to school, don't care where you went to, most people don't even have high school diplomas in the music business. And for us, so my outlook on it is very touchy-feely. I'm checking for your pulse. I'm checking for how what kind of father you are, what kind of cousin you are. Those are things that I pay attention to more than anything that you can give to me that's written on a piece of paper.
Great. So the panel topic suggests that there's actually something wrong with the GPA as a metric. But if you look at the hiring process, and I don't know how many of you have actually seen this happen, almost all hiring managers do the same thing, which is they take the resume, they flip to the back, they look at what college you went to, and then they might see a GPA, and then they throw it in a bunch of different piles, and only actually start to evaluate candidates who make it through that first screening. So my first question is there really something wrong with using the GPA and using where you went to college as the first filter? And if there's something wrong with it, why is it so widely used? And I'll start with you, Alex, because representing investment banking, that's sort of the heart of the traditional recruiting ecosystem.
So is there something wrong? It depends on how much you rely on it. The way I would put it is, if you happen to be looking at a resume and it's a top school and the kid has a top GPA, that probably means that that does not disqualify that kid from further consideration. It's insufficient. As I said earlier, it just doesn't, the GPA in the school, just does not. We'll give you an example. You look at a resume, you see a good school, a good GPA, and all the other things you could superficially want on a resume. What the kid did for its summers, they did summer internships at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and they speak a language, and they have taken all the right courses, and they've done all these great things. And at that point, you can't tell anything about the person's character. You can't tell anything about whether they're a nice person. You can't tell whether they are a selfish person or a selfless person. So in a business where you're trying to hire people who are going to make any team they're on better than itself, to create more than the sum of the parts, you have no idea what you're looking at. So the question is, what do you look for on a resume, or what do you look for in an interview, or what is the way that you're going to get at those things that are really going to make a difference?
And Brendan, what do you think of that?
I think there's been a bunch of science that's been done that says the GPA is in fact not the predictor, but in my personal experience is that historically if someone, and getting a good GPA, sure there's some intellectual ability that's necessary, but a lot of that, what goes on there is, am I good at playing that game and ending up with a score that's really good in that game? Whereas particularly in technology, where the value is placed on creating something from nothing, really what we want to understand are other things, because it's not like you're running some game if you go in to build something from nothing. There is no playbook, there's no safety net, so there are other things that have very little to do with proving, did you understand the rules of the game and did you play the game really, really well? And so those things for us, we look at things like leadership, leverage, and results are one way we hire people and one way we measure people in terms of their performance. But leadership, somewhat similar to what Alex mentioned, is can you inspire people to achieve a shared objective? And there's a bunch of different behaviors and personalities that can do that, but that's one thing that is very specific and different than were you able to score a 99% on a test.
And Kristen, if there's all this data that's suggesting that the GPA is wrong, why is it still so widely used?
Well, when we talk to lots of different companies, we work with companies like LinkedIn, Morgan Stanley, and other companies that in some cases they get hundreds of thousands of applications a year for entry-level roles. So the challenge for them is actually not necessarily that they need to be convinced that your grades are not predictive of your success on the job. I think generally when we speak with companies, there's an essential agreement to that, because you can be in your career 5-10 years and you realize those who do really well embody some other traits, and everyone has different words for them, but it's like, oh, it's that person who got shit done, or it's that person who motivated a team that didn't work for them to somehow do the stuff that they thought was important, or whatever the case may be, or they just gritted it out when other people were going to fail. But the problem is you can't measure those things when you get 100,000 resumes, right? So it's just a logistical issue. And 100,000 isn't a fringe case. That's one very large media company we work with. But I know that you guys could give your numbers. But
that tension is a reality of every place I've worked at. I worked at Microsoft where they get 10x that or something, huge numbers. LinkedIn gets a lot of interest. So if Kristen is the person looking to hire, the reason that the job has been funded, business need that needs to be met yesterday. So that's the conditions in which people are being hired usually is there's a huge amount of pressure. So people are looking for a way to quickly get from the 100,000 down to 10,000. So whatever signal is there, and these traditional sort of canonical signals, which I think are flawed, have been the easiest ones to get, create some perceived efficiency in the process. But that's sort of the conditions under which most people are hiring. There's a pressing business need that needs to be filled yesterday.
And Anthony, you can't rely on GPA because, as you said before, a lot of people who don't have a college diploma. Yeah. So how do you do it when you don't have those data points to look for?
I think the concept of the GPA, why it's there, I understand. I just think what it measures has to evolve. The music business just went through this with streaming, right? Now, the RAA passed new rules where the amount of times a video is seen or watched or streamed, it now counts towards like, the bottom line of your sales. So a lot of artists are going gold and platinum again because now they're able to quantify what's happening digitally. So RIA, the concept of what they were doing was right. They just had, it's just the scoring system had to evolve into today's world. And I think that's what ultimately has to happen with the GPA. You have to find a way to mix some real life interaction in there for it to have some more substance in today's world.
Yes.
I was just going to say, it made me think of something, and not to put my LinkedIn hat on for a minute, but you could use sort of any platform to do this. Some of the things that people that maybe didn't even graduate from high school but crush it in the music business do, probably can be articulated if you sit in front of your phone for 90 seconds or 120 seconds or 5 minutes and say, hey, I did this really interesting thing, here's what I did, and put that signal out to the world. People like me were like, I want to find people who have that thing. Any place you can put that signal out there so someone can pick it up and be like, that's it. But I also see that a lot of times, I talk to thousands of students, and we've talked about this, that don't connect the dots on stuff they've either done at school or over the summer or anything that they perceive as like, I don't have any experience. But it seems like people aren't helping them connect the dots on, I was a busboy for 3 summers, and that has everything to do with customer satisfaction and lots of things that are going to apply immediately, but the language they apply to it and the thing that they apply to it, they don't show up in the interview and say, I want to tell you how awesome it was to be a busboy for 3 years, and here's how I think it's going to help your business. So I think there's this gap in sort of putting the right context in place for particularly a lot of early in career people, that the gap's not that wide, but I think there's language that can be applied, and then putting that signal out there is a way that we can start taking some steps forward.
Can I just to add to this? When we hire first-year people right out of undergraduate school, they come in, they join what we call the analyst program. Analyst program lasts 3 years, and after 3 years, you're either promoted to an associate or you're done and you go back to do something else, maybe go to business school or do something else. We often joke with our entry-level analysts, who are usually a really very bright and accomplished bunch of kids, that we sort of say to them on day one, congratulations, you're now a fungible unit of labor. And the reason we say that is because you hire an analyst, you're just hiring them for their skills. They're raw skill. They're a tabula rasa. You do not hire an analyst for their judgment, their wisdom, their insight, their leadership skill, their relationship building skills, and their ability to make money for the firm. You hire them because you're going to put them to work, and then you're going to teach them a whole lot of things. And hopefully, if you then say to an analyst, take a look at, as an example, hopefully if you look up at people who are 5 or 10 years older than you, hopefully you'll find some people that inspire you, and you'll find some people you'll think like, wow, I'd like to be doing that in 5 or 10 years. Those people are starting to get paid for their wisdom and their insight and their judgment, their leadership skill and their relationship building skills. So this question about what does GPA tell you? The GPA actually tells us that you're capable of being a good analyst. It doesn't tell us that you're going to be any good at making the transition from the lower order skills, which are you're smart, you work hard, and you have integrity, to the higher order skills, which are you're somebody who can become a leader, you're somebody who can build and own and develop client relationships, you're somebody who is going to help us develop the firm.
Yeah, and you hear that kind of thing a lot. You hear a lot of colleges don't prepare students for the right things. Employers are looking for soft skills or certain sets of skills that don't directly come out of college. I mean, you hear a lot of talk, but the question is, and you all use different words. Alex, you talked about teamwork and leadership. Kristen, you talked about getting shit done. How do you measure getting shit done?
Well, so we the last 3 years have gone to school on what is the right set of things first, and then we figured out how to measure them. So getting shit done fits nicely into grit, which is one of our 7 competencies we happen to measure. And 2 things. One is we literally just went and asked employers for 3 years, dozens and hundreds of employers, what is it that people do to succeed early in career? Not what you put in job descriptions, but what is it actually that they're doing, and tell us the stories. And then we actually took people in boot camps and stick them in these employers. We watched it happen. And then we took my co-founder, who actually has the competency in measuring these things, right? His work before this was all about that. So we actually created a model to do this. So there's a few things. One is, what are the right things to measure? And it's true that it's different in every company. So what it takes to succeed at LinkedIn is different than what it takes to succeed to work for Anthony, than what it takes to succeed to work for Morgan Stanley. But it's ultimately, there are a set of things that matter. So first of all, we figured that out. And then we actually we created a model that takes where someone is at, which is they've graduated from college, and there are transferable skills, right? There are things that they've learned, probably more in their extracurricular, sports, and other activities, work experience maybe, but also from academics, that transfer. But the translation is the challenge. So we have a model that actually draws forth what is it that you did that would measure that thing, and then how can we translate it? And we ask a set of situational judgment questions. We have an instrument that actually measures your grit, ownership, rigor, teamwork, et cetera. So we have sort of a mix of just sanity, which is, yeah, this is the right thing, of course, and then science, which actually goes about measuring things. And I guess the most important thing is what do you do with that? And our overall vision is that we'd like to give employers the tools to activate what they already want to do, which is they all realize that it's not just about your core schools, which tend to be elite schools, and your GPA, because there's probably density of quality in those places, so it's kind of like a safe bet, but they're not getting the results from those people that they want because they don't hit the ground running, they're not gritty, and they're not necessarily get shit done people. And so we're in a constant learning process, but we do have an instrument to measure it. We know for sure it's imperfect. We know for sure it's also way better than what exists today, but it's based on, I guess, a combination of the intuition of our employers and the science around how to measure these types of non-cognitive competencies.
So assuming that now people believe the GPA is an end-all be-all, and you're providing a mechanism to measure some of these other things that employers are more important. I think the question that comes up is, would that be now another thing additive to the college experience that you actually have, Brandon? What would it take for a LinkedIn, one of the top tech companies, to hire somebody who didn't have these traditional metrics, didn't go to a good college, didn't get good grades in college, or maybe didn't go to college at all? Like, would LinkedIn be willing to take the leap on somebody who has all these things that you're actually looking for, and what would you need to see to be able to make that happen?
Yeah, positively, we would. They would need to have a very complete LinkedIn profile that shows what they've done. A lot of it is in fact what people have done. So I mean, back to my comment on, if I worked as a waiter for 3 years, I'd want to make sure that I had the right language to represent that work as important to making this transition into the workforce. But a lot of it is you building things and creating things. So that is evidence that there wasn't some rule book that you played really well. You created something from nothing. In a way, I mean, for us, literally on LinkedIn, you can go represent the work you've done through, you put your portfolio of work out there, you put videos out there of what you've done, you put presentations out there, which is fact-based things of what you have done. So those are the things we really index really heavily on. And then enough of those signals are out there, ideally over the next N number of years, hopefully not too distant future, where there's enough of those signals out there that you can take that 100,000 and really get down to the folks that it doesn't matter where you went to school. I mean, our campus recruiting strategy is evolving. We just had a blog post about it a couple weeks ago. It's not going to be about going to school. It's going to be going to major metropolitan areas or areas where there's talent. It doesn't matter where they went to school, and see who's built what stuff, no matter what background they're in. And then when it comes to interviewing, really it's going to be, hey, Kristen, let's sit down and really understand how your values align to what we believe in and how we work together and how we behave. Clearly there's enough signals that know that you have the skills and capability. It's really going to be how well are we going to work together. So.
And Alex, I'll talk the same question because I'm skeptical that in investment banking you could invest, you could imagine investment banks being willing to hire people who never went to college.
I think you're right to be skeptical. I think that's I will say that I think that we are in the earlier stages of really rethinking this. But we are meeting, we're a lot of what we're looking at is being driven by, the beginning of a real recognition that the world has changed and we have not changed as much as the world has. So I don't want to, this is not a session about millennials, but there's a certain amount of overlap to that issue. It's crystal clear the best students are not always in the best colleges. The best people are not always in the best colleges. It's also crystal clear that we don't want to spend 10 times what we're currently spending on recruiting to go out to 10 times as many schools in the country in order to find an extra 10% of kids. So I like what Brendan said about going to a city as opposed to going to a college. I think it'll be a long time before Morgan Stanley stops recruiting at some of the Ivy League schools. But we have so many successful examples of senior executives who did not come from Morgan Stanley schools that there's a lot of sympathy among the management of Morgan Stanley for this idea. I guess people are talking their own books. It's a whole bunch of people. Some of the most senior people at Morgan Stanley went to St. Luke's College and St. Francis College, and I'd be surprised if anybody could tell within 100 miles where those colleges are. That could be a challenge.
I don't see any hands, so
yeah,
we
but
keep going.
There are a lot of people that think that we have to find a better way, but when you sort of give us the stark alternative of are you going to go out and hire kids who didn't go to college? The first question would be, where are you going to find them? How would you build a pipeline? How are we going to go find a pipeline for a high quality bunch of kids who are not going to college and will outperform?
Yeah, and Anthony, I'm not skeptical because you're already doing it, right? You're already hiring people who didn't go to good colleges or get good GPA. So, what are you looking for, and how do you do it? I mean, what are you looking for instead?
It happens both ways for me. I gave an example earlier today to you guys. The only kid that I've hired out of college, he had a finance degree from Duke. Smart kid, had all the basic skills, but you could kind of tell he did it because his parents wanted him to, and he really loved music, was dying for it, and just wanted to somehow be in the game. And to me, it was like, this is the perfect guy. He's clearly book smart, and he loves what I'm doing. So, to me, his floor is he could be, a kick-ass assistant, right? Which to me is very useful. And his ceiling is, he could be me. I always say the best leaders breed better leaders, and I try to look for guys who have that potential, guys who have the passion for what I'm doing, but who are educated like the way I was, so that some of the biggest challenges in entertainment, it comes when you're raising the bar in the game, and you start to get hit with challenges that school does come in handy when you're speaking to accountants and lawyers and things like that. That process of going to school and understanding some of that stuff you learn in books, it does come in handy, and that's where some guys in the business who don't go to college get stuck. So if I'm able to find someone who has that type of education yet still has the passion to do what, I almost call them the concept of it, the guys who are gone with the wind, guys who went to college basically to figure it out, ended up, there's a girl who was an assistant to a big executive at DreamWorks who's a fucking doctor, has a PhD, but hated the hospital so much she wanted experience in the entertainment business. So I just kind of feel like I go for passion. And I think passion, for me personally, is the way to kind of steer clear of folks who can give a good interview and pass the eye test.
And Kristen, passion is, at least I'm not aware of passion being one of the Koru 7. Is passion important?
It's actually a fundamental belief in place, is that people do what they prefer, which is what they're passionate about, and what makes them happy, right? So it doesn't matter what the job description says. When you hire someone, they will do what they prefer to do. They'll find the part of that job that's okay to keep themselves from getting fired. But now in school, they'll do what you need to do to get the grade, by the way. So that's a little unfortunate, because sometimes you need to almost deprogram that after college. It's like, actually, no, follow what you really do want to do. Go, but make yourself incredibly, indispensably useful in that thing you prefer to do. So I actually think it's built in, it's inherent, because the experiences people have that demonstrate their competencies and strengths, it's all about what they're passionate about, what they prefer to do. People do what they like, right? And so it's, unless their parents are, telling them to do something different, and they'll suffer for a while, but at some point, unless there's incredible other forces on them, they will do what they like. And I think that's a fundamental piece of, you can't expect someone to get good at something that they don't love and that they don't prefer to do. So I think it's built in, it's inherent, and those are the places where they will build their skills. So people passionate about something that involves working in the team, then they're actually going to build that muscle, right? And they're going to be really good at that. They're passionate about really solving problems, and maybe they're rigorous and they dive into data to solve that problem. But it's always about something they prefer to do.
And I think that one translates pretty quickly to shareholder value, whatever value you want to attach it to, because I ask this all the time, what do you really want to do? or if questions around weakness, people give these stupid answers of I work too hard or whatever it is. If somebody can be really clear on like, I suck at this, don't have me go near a problem like that. Particularly early in career, I get these like canned BS answers. That to me, what happens in my mind is I'm an HR guy. We're gonna be sitting down in 6 months when you got some performance issue and you're not happy, you're not really doing what you want to do, and you're trying to spread yourself too thin, or you think you need to maybe be really good at this operational thing, but really you should be working on some future product stuff. That stuff actually does translate into it's a problem for the business if you don't get that right? Because there's inefficiency, you spend a bunch of cycles even managing the person out or up or dealing with it. So it's such a fundamental thing for people to understand what is it they want to do. And when you talk about it in terms of happiness and what they're really good at, and just keep doubling down on that. And I'd see that a lot early in career. People feel like they have to attempt to speak to all the things that they could possibly be good at and have a really great answer for all of it. And I think that's actually a problem.
Alex, is passion important to you?
Yeah, it's very, very important. But it's tricky because we have a saying in our office that if you work at Morgan Stanley, one of the things that you have in common with each other is that you did not have a calling. Because if you had a calling, you wouldn't be a banker. And so, right, I mean, I can tell you a lot of great things about being a banker, but it's not a calling. If you had a calling, you'd be a priest or a rabbi, or maybe you might be a doctor, you might be an artist. I don't know what else falls into that category. But nobody grows up thinking, if I could just lend stock for a living, I'd be so happy. And so, people choose to go into banking because they did not have a calling, and they needed a job, and they wanted to do something hopefully interesting, challenging, fun, maybe give you the opportunity to work with some really interesting people, maybe the opportunity to travel, hopefully lucrative, hopefully, a lot of great things. You could tick a lot of boxes with a great career. So if you accept that, then you have to start asking, so if it's not a calling, like what role does it play in your life? And are you really, what is it that you're going to be passionate about? And one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about in the interview process is, is this a person that is focused on their own happiness? And how do they define what it will take for them to be happy? And this may not sound intuitive coming from a bunch of bankers, because a lot of people would say, we're not here to be happy, we're here to beat Goldman Sachs, or we're not here to be happy, we're here to make money, we're not here to be happy, we're here to serve clients, why are we caring about happiness? But the answer is that you want to hire people who see their job as a part of a whole life. And you want that life to include something much, much broader than banking. Because the people who will define their happiness and their success as coming from, like the worst interview answer ever, if I say to some young person, what do you think it's going to take for you to become a happy person? And they say something like, when I'm sitting in your seat. That's a horrible answer. You want to find people who have passions, even if those passions have nothing to do with banking, and that they can understand that their career is in service to something bigger than themselves. And I don't mean that by saying charity work, although charity work is a great example of something that's in service to something bigger than yourself. So for us, the happiness issue is a very, very important high-order leadership skill. Nobody likes working for people that aren't happy, because even if you look up to them and respect them and know you can learn from them, you don't want to be like them. They're not good role models. And the second and probably more important issue about working for somebody who's not a happy person is that if you look at them and you figure out that they're not concerned, but they can't get their own act together in terms of being happy, they're probably not worried about your happiness. And I don't need somebody to worry about my happiness every day of the week, but I do like to know that I work for people who actually care about me. And I think most people do. And it's a kind of a virtuous circle when people feel that way about the people they work for, as opposed to people feeling like they're in it on their own, which creates a more transactional relationship. So sorry if that was a lecture. It's great to speak forever, but it's great.
Can I say something? I think it's really interesting to hear these sort of like really impressive, well-known employers talk about things like passion and teamwork and happiness, right? And the thing that's really hard is that like it's true, it's authentic. I mean, they know what's going to make people succeed in their companies, but the signal that they give to job seekers is super fuzzy, right? Because the challenge there is that it's really hard for a college grad to hear that and say, okay, great, and I'm going to translate what I have into that that thing they're asking me for. And so I think that's some of the problem that we face is actually, great, like GPA is not a good signal, but how can you stay human in the process, right? Stay human in the process, because this is people and these are very human-centric types of qualities and traits that we're looking for, but you need to use science, right? And I've been fascinated by following what's happening in people analytics, you know, and we call ourselves a people analytics company now, but really it's just like, okay, let's all figure out what this means. But really, at the end of the day, we work with one technology company that's going to sound harsh, but it's actually very human, that for early career talent, they're at the point now that they have a pre-hire analytics platform that allows them to hire people without interviewing them. And they have seen the success of this to be so strong that actually the people are performing better than when they had humans involved in the process looking at resumes, or even machines, frankly, looking at the same stuff. So I think it's an opportunity for this, again, data and innovation to actually transform the people business, the people part of our businesses, which if you think about it, you know, that stuff has transformed the sales and the operations and the technology parts, but this is one of the last parts in companies that is still kind of archaic in how it works. And that's what we're so excited about. But at the same time, what's scary, it's a little scary if you say, okay, now a robot's going to choose your people, right? So that's brutal. But that's where we are trying to figure out how can we dissect exactly what's being said by these employers and then actually say, okay, so you've got to have something that works at scale. Otherwise, it's not going to be an impact, and it's sort of onesie-twosie here and there, and it's just like subjective, and everyone says it in a different way. And the signal's not clear to educational institutions if they're trying to prepare people, or to colleges, or sorry, to actual people who are looking for work. So I think that's this thing it's upon us, and it's very timely with this wave of looking at how, you know, analytics is now affecting the people sector and the people industry. And I think that we're going to see some really big changes in the next years because of the confluence of those particular trends.
And on the data front, I mean, what I really like about what Kristen and team are doing is, I mean, getting those signals to me quickly translates into, if I could not spend 150,000 hours a year hiring the people that LinkedIn does spend to win, and there are other signals I get, that's going to give me a competitive advantage to outflank my competitors who aren't using those signals. So at LinkedIn, we use LinkedIn data as an example to look at engineering hiring, which, you know, every Monday, 5 o'clock, we let the CEO know what's going on with engineering hiring because it's really critical for us. So we did a lot of work to really dig into what a great engineer at LinkedIn was, and getting the feedback from the engineering team, they gave very sort of canonical in quotes, descriptions, you know, companies, schools, backgrounds, and so forth. And then we looked at performance data of people. When we started digging into it, we really noticed some interesting patterns. That some of the people that did extremely well were not this canonical background, did not work at the companies. Some of them did not even have the skills that you think that they would have for the jobs that they're being hired for. And that, for me, as the person in the hiring seat who needs to let the CEO know every Monday that we're moving quickly, is hugely important, because I now feel like that is great news, because the really smart companies that surround LinkedIn are great at hiring people, are all going after the same canonical people. I now know there's a pool over here and a pond over there and an ocean over there with incredibly talented people. I'm going to go there as fast as I can, and the data told me it's going to help me. That will translate into LinkedIn winning faster and more effectively. So any signal I can get that's got some science behind it, I'm going to feed it into our system as quickly as possible.
And what were some of those signals that you found?
Well, I mean, they ended up showing up as patterns of, interesting, people worked in the chip business, and we found that a certain type of problem solving we found common in people that were doing semiconductor work, parallel processing, the way they think as engineers, really translated really, really well. So we'd probably have to dig into like exactly what are those skills, but those are decent sample size and interesting pattern. That is, I would spend every day, all day, if someone could be serving up patterns like that to me, that would make me more effective to hire the best people that are going to succeed quickly and ramp up faster. I mean, that is how we would win on the talent front.
Yeah, and you know, I think one of the things that people have been very optimistic about there being different signals besides the very expensive college degree, you know, or different non-cognitive skills, you know, things like grit, is that there's this belief that if you moved signals, you would somehow democratize access to good, high-paying careers and jobs, and you'd have opportunity more evenly distributed as talent is. But historically, that hasn't happened when you've created new measures of assessment. You know, the original purposes of standardized testing was saying, well, we can't understand what's happening at different colleges. We don't really know what is happening at these different schools. Let's create a standardized test, and because we actually care about people's ability to critically think and their ability to analyze data. So we'll test for that. And then what you find is, SAT score and ACT score becomes highly correlated to the amount of money that you have to invest in SAT prep and ACT prep. So if you start hiring people based on grit, or you start hiring people based on certain job patterns, how do you stop that from being just yet another thing that you have to happen in addition to the college degree? Now you need this prep course on grit before you can be able to get a job.
You got to do it like the NFL does drug testing, just like Randy. Don't really anyone prepare for it. A lot of people fail. I mean, that's a tough question. See, for where I sit, or half of where I sit, like, I've been fortunate. Most of the people in my business came from nothing. So I'm not weeding out the privilege versus the non. You know what I'm saying? It's more about the person. But with that being said, I do, obviously in the entertainment business, specifically in the movie business, you see a lot of the best young and brightest stars all have fathers who are like running Fox, Warner Brothers, whatever the case may be. But I got to tell you, in entertainment, man, like the work at the end of the day, it's like music, right? At the end of the day, it's all about the record. Like I'll use, and I think at the end of the day, like the actual work is what like separates you from everyone else. And I've seen a lot of guys in the mailroom go toe to toe with whoever's dad that runs Fox Searchlight and win because they just outworked the person. So for me personally, that's my take on it. I don't get to see that side as much. I mean, look, I understand, especially at LinkedIn's size, you're going to need data to scale recruiting. It's impossible to have that much people coverage. But for me, at the end of the day, like I don't want you to wear a suit and tie when you're interviewing with me. I don't care about anything I can see with my eyes. You know what I mean? I want to know what I can see with my ears, or what I'm saying, like, or what you're saying to me, how to react in different situations. To me, that's what's really telling versus like all these correlations on who went to what class or who's in what fraternity and all this stuff. Like a lot of that's really luck. You know what I'm saying? Like, and to me, I think the soul tells a lot more than any of that stuff.
What about you, Alex? If you end up needing to get grit to get a job in investment banking, I promise you there's going to be grit boot camps. So,
the way I think about this question is that if you can't figure out how to do what we're all talking about, hiring for all these behavioral strengths or avoiding weaknesses, you will I don't see how to fix this problem on Wall Street. Forgive me, I'm not allowed to speak for Wall Street. I work for one company, I run a few businesses. Other firms may have other ideas. At least as far as I can see it. What I think the key to solving this problem of getting people to hire from more diverse populations, whether that's racial, gender, socioeconomic, because that's something that's not generally got good outcomes on Wall Street, is all about this question about, are you hiring people who are not just really talented, but are really empathetic, are really self-aware, are really see things about they see their work life in the context of their broader life. Whether they chose to get married, to have children, to do something philanthropically, to give back to their community in some way, those things really matter. And to the extent that you can do a better job of identifying those kids that are most likely to lead those lives, and then challenge them and see them thrive and promote them and let them become leaders, I think you've changed culture in a way that gets you the outcomes that we're talking about here. I think if I were to try and paint a case for just going right for the outcome, I honestly don't know how I would do that.
All right, we talked mostly about this interface between college and career, and we've been talking mostly from the employer's perspective. So I'll let you now, there's going to be people representing colleges in the room here, so I'll let you be in a position to advise folks on potentially how their organizations could do better. What's one thing, I'll start with you, Kristen, what's one thing that you would advise a college that they could do to improve the connection between higher education and career?
I think one of the challenges when we see people coming out of college and they enter the world of ambiguity, which is the world of work and the innovation economy, is that they're like, where's the syllabus, right? And it's like a deprogramming, I've said it, that needs to take place because there's been such a structured life for this person before they got to your college, but then certainly within your college. It's such a structured environment that it's like, it's really like book smart and street dumb, you know? And it's just incredible how, like, first of all, they've never been in an office. So it's a little ridiculous for us to expect them to perform in a sport and a stadium that they've never been in, right? It's insanity in a way. And then they've also never really had a sense of, they don't know what the jobs even are. So they're not even by category, right? Like, oh, there's project management, there's analysts, there's sales, like not even by category. So there's just this complete disconnect. But the other thing is that they haven't really ever just been thrown in the deep end and said, good luck, right? Because we actually ran boot camps the first 3 years, we continue to at Koru, and we put them in that deep end, which is a company like LinkedIn, and we say, here's a problem, and we don't give them answers, and we don't give them a syllabus, and it's incredibly fast how they begin to shift their mindset and move into active mode. No one's going to tell them what problem they need to solve specifically. They actually need to first define the problem, right? So this all came from academia, right? Project-based learning, problem-based learning. We all know this in theory. I think if it was applied in a really, it will seem risky in academic environments, but frankly, and radical, but it's just a lot more like the way it's going to be when you land in a company, then you wouldn't have that shock. You wouldn't have that deer in the headlights, tell me what I'm supposed to do. These people have been working for the A grade, terrified of failing. Failing is learning. They need to just take off the veneer and just be given a chance to fail. And the system is obviously, failing is bad in academia. So that's I think the real conflict and the real challenge. And I empathize with colleges because so many things you have to do. It's not an easy thing to shift. But from my perspective and the perspective we have of seeing now thousands of college grads and the challenges they have from incredible institutions, all sorts of institutions, they all seem to struggle with that same problem.
Brendan?
It'd be interesting to have a course that's designed to make people fail. I mean, sir, just because I
Have
agree.
you taken OCAM?
I mean, just there's so much. I mean, it's the one guarantee, right? You're going to fail on a weekly basis when you get in the professional world.
That's why you're
Nice
supposed to
job. You failed. You succeeded.
I think
So good. I can't believe you said that.
it's interesting. I mean, I think to my point earlier, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to early in career folks that aren't applying, aren't connecting the dots on whatever that they've been doing that have nothing to do with the syllabus and trying to, get a 4.0 or whatever, that they can't, their brain doesn't even go there. They're not even framing up, hey, I did this thing between my freshman and sophomore summer. I was working in the bookstore, like connecting the dots because it's all the same set of skills. And then the other is, I remember when I went to college, I realized I was interested in doing radio stuff and TV stuff. And like I could just use the radio gear, and I could use the video gear. Like what? Like just and like the fact that most college campuses have just incredible amount of resources which have nothing to do with the syllabus, and finding a way to see measure that and really encourage people, because there is no sort of instruction manual on like, yeah, if you want to go get into ceramics, go use a ceramics studio because it's open on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, go make it happen. Really making sure that people are encouraged in the right way to sort of build a portfolio of thinking and actual stuff that they did that goes well beyond the syllabus, I think is a pretty wide open opportunity as far as I'm concerned there.
Alex?
I can't blame the colleges for basically teaching the kids to sort of conform to what incentives the employers are putting out there. If we incentivize, if we make the rules so that we make it clear that we want all the 3.8 finance majors, then we'll we'll see a lot of 3.8 finance majors. And I think so many important things have been said about the things that will really be very telling about people's future success beyond the 3.8. And I think that there has to be more of a development of a partnership between the educators and corporate America on this subject, so that the definitions of what success will look like can be translated into something that will actually happen on campus. I have no idea how that happens, but I just otherwise I can't give any advice, because until corporate, like your point about not going to campuses and just going to a city, You just turned it from, you know, if you're in Boston and you go to, you know, I don't know, I want to insult any firm, but you go to a Boston school that's not an Ivy, you know, now you know where to go to apply for a job at LinkedIn. I think you just democratized the process and in a very positive way.
I think that a much more portfolio based view on what someone's doing as a student is super interesting. Not just like in your designer and you got a portfolio, not like, you know, you're an English major and let's see your papers. Like the portfolio of stuff you did. Like what's that experience? I mean, God knows you can capture that in so many amazing ways. Could be analytical ways, could be super creative ways. That to me would be incredibly telling and would give me information that would differentiate a population that often is hard to differentiate, and that's why you're slicing these, you know, thin slices. This person's a 3.8, this person's a 3.9. It would really kind of change how you look at it.
Anthony?
First of all, I actually think a lot of the issues that are happening in colleges kind of come from high school in a lot of ways, because high school is also incredibly competitive when it comes to GPA. If you don't get this certain GPA, you can't get into Stanford. If you don't get this, so I think the mindset, a lot of these, it kind of starts there, which is, you know, obviously a massive problem. And the other thing is, dude, college is fucking expensive. So people are just trying to get in and get out, so they don't have to pay for an extra year after some. I mean, when you're paying 50 grand a year, I mean, USC's like $1,300 a unit. That's insane. That's exactly what I would do if I was going to USC. How do I get out of here in 3 years? And I mean, when kids have no choice but to get an investment banking job because that's the only six-figure gig they can get right out of a 4-year program. Like, you're gonna get guys who like are a bunch of guys who are doing things that aren't their calling. So I think like it's a lot bigger than like, you know, just, oh, what programs can we install in college and whatnot. I mean, it kind of starts early.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good because it'll lead me into the last question. It's the last question for everybody. So you work with Nas, so you'll know this, that, you know, his first album, Illmatic, is recognized as the best record in the history of hip hop, because it was, right? But his second album, people think is pretty average, mostly because Jay-Z kind of dissed it. But it was good, actually. It's really good. Second song on the second album, it was "If I Ruled the World." It was written. So I'll give you more power. You're not just advising colleges now. Now you rule the world. What would you do to change the system? And I'll have everybody go, and you only have about, you change the world, but you can only do it in about 30 seconds.
I need 25 of them to think. Man, you know, I gotta say, look, I'm not trying to sound like Bernie Sanders, but I think if college was cheaper and it was more about the experience of being, if it was treated more like summer camp with rules, I think people would get a lot more out of it. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Like, I said this story once at Koru. You know, when you were a kid, like, you learned the ABCs by singing a melody. And that melody was like an exercise in your brain on how to memorize something. That's creative learning at its best. But once you get to like middle school and high school, that shit's just sucked out of the curriculum and it's all about like structure. But like really like think about it. You're never gonna forget your ABCs because of that fucking song.
I have it.
And I think you really should approach how you educate yourself. Like, you know, like it should be that simplistic, because honestly, it's not that complicated, in my opinion.
Okay. Alex, how would you change the world?
No, this is great, because I'm going to stay right on the same theme. If I could just do one thing, I'm the ruler, it would go, it's the most important stuff that matters in the creation of the people we want to hire and promote occurs when they're kids. It doesn't occur in college. It certainly doesn't occur at Morgan Stanley. If I could like make one rule, this is obviously a crazy idea, but like you'd legislate parenting. You do something. I have three sons. They're 23, 21, and 16. So one just graduated, one's in college, one's in high school. And I think the standard model is we all raise our kids to be really competitive. And on the one hand, there's nothing wrong with that, because life's competitive. You got to be able to compete. You got to be able to win. You got to be able to lose. It's important. On the other hand, there's a tremendous danger in creating winners, which is that they end up feeling like their success is the result of their hard work. They don't appreciate who's mentored them, whose shoulders they've stood on, the advantages they've had. And so when you raise an entire society of people that are focused on their own success more than anything, and then if they're going to use that success to give back to somebody, they're going to just take care of themselves, their family, and their tribe, then you get the kind of tribalism that we get. So that's where I would focus, and I would need a lot more than 30 seconds.
Yep. Brandon.
100% transparency on some kind of empathy on one end and complete asshole index on the other. So you can, just there's no bullshit and hiding on like who you are really, because that would, all boats would rise. And
like your nose would.
just, just something that's, beacon that's blinking, and you can really understand these things.
So Kristen, you rule the world, but you don't have any more time. So just one, really quick.
Actually, this is going to sound a bit arrogant, but I'm doing it because I actually believe that if we have employers clear about what it is they want, and we can create a very specific and measurable signal, because they are the customers of the talent, then I actually think all the stuff downstream just has to map to that. Because so if there's consistency with at least enough critical mass of employers, and that happens, and they say, look, this is no longer what matters. It's not your degree or your GPA or what school you went to. This is the new measuring stick. And you know what? The outcome will be a level playing field, because it's an advantage to get a good GPA. The stories behind good GPAs are, I didn't have to work 4 jobs. The people who did have to work 4 jobs could very well have gotten a good GPA if they weren't doing that. And that's the masses. That's everybody. The Ivy League is this tiny 1%. That's not really what's representative of America. So we actually get really excited about the idea of leveling the playing field as an outcome, but I think it does start from get the people with the power, i.e. the employers, who are customers of the talent, really clear on what it is that they want, and create a system that measures it, and then everything else has to fall in place because of the free market.
Very good. All right. Well, thank our panelists.